the biggest thing is that what you all were talking about earlier. Seriously,
Okay.
is yes.
Thanks
I
for not
don't just
answering my question. Yeah,
I don't
I'll
just
mute up.
cover female predators. I also discuss male victims, and I think that when men are sexually assaulted by another man or a woman, it's viewed as just go along, and it's all a big joke. And I gave the example of being flashed. If a man pulls out his genitals in front of a woman, she's very much empowered to call the man out, call the police, report it, serve as a victim, spend 3 years in court over it. And she's very adamant about it. And that's great. We want to have victims being empowered. I have yet to see a police report in which a man has come forward and says a woman flashed her boobs, a woman flashed her genitals at me, or a woman groped me and grabbed me, and I want to file a police report. It was illegal. And so, because it's supposed to be sort of funny, and a man will be mocked for it. And we see this is what's happening with Ryan. And I'm very, I'm happy that Ryan was able to talk about what happened to him to a degree. And I think that whether it's boys or men, whether it's woman predators or male predators, the fact that someone can come forward and say something that he knowingly is doing it when he's going to be mocked is to be commended. And everything else happening with Ryan aside, in all of this, he said something
Thank you.
that people laugh about, people laugh about, and shame people for. And you can see that's what they're doing there. And I don't think it's funny if a man is sexually assaulted. And it is sexual assault when someone makes an advance on you and, grabs your genitals, flashes you, and it's just expected that men should accept that type of behavior. And I'm sorry that I'm a buzzkill, but I'm calling out it is a crime.
No,
And whether
you're
you
not a buzzkill, dude. We all agree on that shit for sure.
whether you like the fact that people want to say I got comments, and I'm getting to get a video together now. People like to say, oh, I didn't feel like a victim. I see this a lot from boys who become men when they were sexually abused as children.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like a victim,
Yep.
and I loved it. Well, I got
Yeah.
news for them. I got news for them. You don't get to determine if you're a victim or not. It's the law that determines victimhood, not the individual. And if you
Yeah.
want to change the law to determine that boys can legally have sex with adult women because you don't want to be a victim or you don't feel like a victim, the fact of your feelings that it wasn't victimhood doesn't negate the fact that a
Yeah.
crime was committed against you. The law says you're a victim, and the person that committed it is a
Yeah.
criminal. So I really am trying to. One of the most difficult things that I've got to navigate is a cluster of boys and men that are laughing and bragging about their abuse, and they refuse to accept the
Well,
fact that
I
the
mean,
law says that they're
we,
victims, but they don't have the, do I call it courage? Do I call it bravery? What do I call it, and how do I handle it? And that is the biggest struggle I'm
yeah.
having right now.
And
Okay,
we've talked about. I mean, I talked about that earlier, where we
can I
have people
expand
in
on
this
that?
community that have done that exact same thing that Sam is talking about. They've boasted about it, like, yeah, when I was in high school, my one of my teachers came on to me, and like I was like the cool kid, right? We have well-known people in this community that have boasted about, having being sexually assaulted by adult women when they were minors, like it's a rite of passage, and it's absolutely not. It's fucking this. It's the same thing, It's like you imagine if you were like a female member of this community boasting about getting sexually assaulted by a male teacher when you were in high school.
I always come back to that. And
I
Ryan,
mean,
go ahead.
come
I
on,
guess you
dude.
wanted,
Come on.
you wanted to say
Yeah.
something, Ryan, but
Sorry.
Yeah. Is my audio clear? By the way, I'm in my parking lot, so I just don't have a history of it not
Very
being
clear.
good.
You sound
Okay.
good.
Very good.
So yeah, just like on the male on male sexual assault. This is something it's kind of like kind of an extension of it, but kind of just like what's wrong with society is, society does not benefit from men bottling up experiences like that, because if like they will, like when they're violated in that kind of way, and there's like no, like kind of like nothing done about it or whatever, like they couldn't, like they didn't know what's going on enough to like fight back, they might do something terrible after, in a violent way. And
Right.
like you kind of wonder
Yeah.
why, you know, like, hey, there's like this like, I can't believe that person did that, like this person maybe did like a shooting or something, or just like one day this person just snapped. um you know you
Yeah.
gotta kind of wonder why things
Yeah.
like that happened.
100%. And I even forced that upon, I did a video on my channel, and it doesn't get asked often, but it
I have
occasionally
promoting your
comes
channel.
up.
Here we go.
And if you ask some of these male predators, when was their they some of them, when asked, which they rarely are, and it's the only, one of the only questions I ask them when I have an opportunity to interview predators, which is, hey, were you molested as a kid? And many of them, at least the four that I covered in my video, was they didn't see there was anything wrong with it, and
Yeah.
they thought it was great. And so I do see, I don't know correlation versus causation, but I do see a connection between boys who were molested by women coming away with that experience with a laughing, joking positivity that society has shoved down their throat, and
Yeah.
becoming men and turning themselves into the predator. Because if you're a
No,
14-year-old that
come on.
fucks a 30-year-old, at some point you're going to be 30 years old too. And you're going to start looking at
Yeah.
14-year-olds and
Yeah.
saying, well, wait a minute, society, I've told myself for 20 years it was good for
Yeah.
me. So why shouldn't
Oh,
I effectuate the same type of abuse
Yeah.
on someone else?
well,
Even if they don't
that's not
realize it,
exactly
it warps and it skews
that's the
their reality, right?
well that
And they don't
wasn't
even know.
that wasn't exactly where it was going. I was kind of talking about uh not like it just being in a warped way. I mean, like if something like that, I'm kind of just talking about kind of in the scope of like, you know um I guess male on male or whatever. I just can't speak to the other experiences just because I
Mm.
don't have that or whatever. But I'm talking about like snapping in a violent way.
Well,
Um
yeah, I
Yeah.
think,
Yep.
I would like to
Sam
go. Yeah.
Sam Sam highlighted something. Every every now and then, Sam and I will have a civil conversation on a panel, and we can actually like talk to each other as human beings, unlike tonight. But a few months ago, he and I were talking, and I was, working to promote his channel, which has since blown up. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
but he told me something that I just had never really thought about, like being a male victim, with the male, and the perpetrator is a male too. It's like the double whammy of having to like, tell your story, is that not only like are you now the victim of a sexual assault, but also the label of like, you're also like now you're gay, and I never thought of that in that way before.
Mhm.
And I mean, we talked about it, Sam. I was just like, man, yeah,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it
I'm actually
probably keeps
looking.
so many people, so many victims from like speaking up because of the peer social pressures of you know telling their stories, which is really fucked up,
Yeah, it is, and it is the peer stuff. Like even maybe the adults
Yeah.
can get through it. There was a famous case that I'm, not a famous case, but a well-known case here in Florida, and it was in Daytona Beach. a prominent hotel guy, total scumbag named Dennis Devlin. And I've tracked back a lot of the court records. And one of the documents that I got a hold of was the psychiatric report of it's a 13-year-old boy. He had decades of accusations against him. But the 13-year-old victim was sexually abused by this. He was producing child pornography, and he had a younger man helping him bring younger boys to him. But one of the psychiatric reports that reported on this victim's state was the fact that he was basically kicked out of school because of the relentless assaults on who he was,
Yeah.
calling him a faggot and queer
Yeah.
because he was abused by this. And so, forget even the adult pressure and the adult shame and all of that that comes with it. How about the peer pressure within the schools? And we see that
Yeah.
we see it very much so.
Terrible, dude.
People think that they're going around the school high-fiving when a woman sexually abuses boys. Not,
Mm-hmm.
not in the hundreds of cases I've reviewed. Very rarely see the high fives. I see a canceled hockey season. Two hockey players were sexually
Yeah.
assaulted by a mom at a hotel in Minnesota. They were suspended, the boys were, the victims were, and the entire hockey season was canceled because of it. There weren't no high fives, and the kids were blamed for all of it. So I see too much of the projection, the stepmom porn, and the bullshit that's promoted by Hollywood and all the perverts in the society that promotes this versus
Yeah.
the reality that I see on the back end of actually digging into court records. Kids are called faggots and queer. Seasons are canceled. The dad comes in seeing his wife fucking the stepson of the wife, and he pulls out a belt to beat his son, not to step up and be a
Yeah.
father. So anyway,
Yeah.
it,
that's the
I
kind of
guess
shit that I see.
Yeah, and
yeah, I guess
it's probably and go ahead, right?
well, yeah, I mean, I guess like where I was kind of going with that is like, you know, I mean, masculinity has like a role in society. It's not like it should be necessarily a race or whatever. Like it does have a role, um, you know,
Sure.
by men or whatever. But a lot of people kind of think that like things like that being accepted somehow undermines that. But I'll just say that society does not benefit from uh, men bottling stuff up like that. So I think
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
What?
because beyond that, like it's not even just like the like gay thing. 'Cause obviously, it's not like they're gay or whatever. Like they're straight,
Right.
and then something happened to them, and they were you know violated in a way that they didn't even understand at the time. Um, just one day, they could just like it would be like maybe they didn't do anything before, but they could just snap one day, and a lot of people get
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and you'll
And
be like that one person. You'll be like, oh, I couldn't even see that person doing that. That person just like
they just go
I don't
crazy.
know, shut
Yeah.
up a movie theater or something, and that
And I
society
think
doesn't benefit.
your point is well taken, because I think what you're actually talking about is, so now like the bigger, broader topic is really like redefining what masculinity is, right? In society, at least in American society, because it's so defined as a particular thing. And a big part of like masculinity is like being tough and like holding shit in and dealing with shit. And sure, there's a time and a place for that, but when it comes to like very like traumatic experiences, whether you're a man or a woman, or identify as some other gender, like that, some shit you just can't hold in, and you shouldn't have to hold it in. And you should talk about it with people and get help and get therapy, so I
Yeah,
think that's the
it's kind of
double-edged
like
sword. It's really about a broader a broader issue with how we define masculinity, you know, because there's nothing masculine about like holding in trauma, you know. There's really nothing masculine about that, but society defines masculinity as like, yeah, hold the shit in, boy, just be tough, you know.
Yeah, and especially like I mean, it's kind of one thing. Like, let's say I don't know. I mean, like you get beat up or whatever. That's like maybe another situation. But if it isn't that certain way, and it's followed up like that, um, like I guess just evolving maybe to the point of understanding what happens, like you know, like in the situation or whatever, like when you have tonic immobility or something like that. Um, it's it's like that's kind of what it is. Is you will be angry about it. You know,
Sure.
it won't be something they want. In fact, they'll uh they'll have some pretty violent thoughts in their head. I'll just say,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know.
well, I mean, it starts with, it starts with, my issue is, and this is something that I've previously struggled with, is, you guys are talking about how people deal with trauma and everything, but if, Ryan, in your position, you're saying that you now understand what had happened to you, and that, you're dealing with that and you're working through it. But again, so many boys become men and they are still of the opinion that what happened to them was positive, what happened to them, they were not victims. And so you're dealing with an extra element of, problems in which the law determines victimhood. And, I give this example a lot when I engage in different discussions and talk with people is if you know that someone got their purse stolen from them and you witnessed it, or they got carjacked and they stolen right from there, you either witness it or they tell you about it later. Hey, I got my car carjacked, but I'm not a victim. The experience helped me understand what impoverished people go through, and or people of a life of crime and whatever. And so maybe that person needed it, but I don't feel like a victim. It actually, what I went through was positive. So how do you handle that?
Yeah.
The person doesn't get to determine. The law says, you're a victim. And so
Yeah.
am I supposed to, harming you by saying, and then you come back, and I come back and say, well, hey, you were a victim of a crime. I think you should go report it. It's a very
Yeah.
serious crime. That person could go hurt other people. That person could manipulate it. Why are you trying to make what I think is positive, and why are you trying to turn me into a victim? No, I'm trying to tell you that the law, I don't do anything. The law states that you're a victim. I didn't do anything. I'm just conveying to you what the
Yeah.
law
Or
states.
or
So,
people are concerned about like retribution in some way, shape, or form, right?
yeah.
Like, some kind of I want to call out 111 in chat. Red alert! Hitting the red button. We have Whitticus in chat. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you can turn someone into sociopath with a technique used by the agency.
And I
Yeah,
wanted to
no, I mean,
respond.
oh, yeah, go on.
Well, I wanted to spend real quick to Buzz Lightyear. Buzz, actually, the name of Anthony Cumia's female predator that he was laughing about. Buzz, you made a statement earlier about the pregnancies and the dangerousness of this. The other element to the male side of things is the fact that, girls that are sexually abused and become pregnant are able to have options. Their family is able to have options. Well, if a female, adult female, molests a boy, the boy has no options in what happens to, and the family of the child of the victim has no options. If an adult woman sexually abuses a boy. I've reported on this on my channel. The woman in many cases chooses to have the baby. The child victim doesn't get to determine what happens at that point. Like men don't get to determine what happens if a woman is impregnated from resulting in their sexual encounter, whatever. So
That's crazy. That's
the
wild.
added element of all of this is American society that loves to supposedly hates predators and loves to protect kids is not only shaming a boy and laughing and joking about being molested by a woman, but now he's hit with an 18-year bill for child support, being a victim of sexual abuse
That's
himself.
fucking wild, dude.
And that is the law in every state.
Yeah.
That's the law. That's America. And so
Yeah.
when people do all of it, and I don't see many JD DeLay or Jordan Peterson, all the manosphere, not one of them really is talking about
Yeah.
these real issues. And if
Yeah.
there's like, if I want to be a part of the manosphere, if I want to go and represent, and help empower men, one thing I would look at is going and changing state laws so that victims of sexual abuse don't have to pay for the product of their abuse or the result of the abuse that they sustain because the pedophile predator want the result of the abuse, that a child should not have to pay child support after they
Yeah.
were molested. And I don't hear anyone talking about that.
The manosphere of toxic masculinity, right? When people talk about like toxic masculinity, they're like, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" And I'm like, this is a side effect of it. This is how it works its way into like these situations.
I think that people, Ryan, from my perspective, you're kind of new at this game of being putting yourself forward as a victim of abuse. I can tell you, for most of my life, it's been a challenge, and unfortunately, men have to get used to being mocked and being laughed at, even if you're very young when your abuse took place, and that's the sad reality of the world that we live in. And so, I like I said, Godspeed to you with revealing this. And it's why most male victims don't. And it's why many of them try to hide in plain sight by laughing about it. Because down deep, I know that all the people that I've talked to and all the people that have tried to say that it was good for them, down deep, I know that it's affected them very, very profoundly in a difficult way that's made their life path difficult. And so even when people mock me and people laugh at me and say stuff to me because I've been prominent in my own situation, now you are faced with the same. I challenge them to be better people, and I don't wish them a situation where I'm going to say that they're predators or they're exhibiting predatory behavior. I think people are very uncomfortable with male victimhood. They're very uncomfortable with it, and the biggest people that are most uncomfortable with it are men themselves because men are
Hmm.
very very insecure and they are full of shame and they just don't know how to handle that in the age of trying to be tough guys and it's a sad place where we're at, something I've tried to fight against, but
Yeah,
uh,
Yeah,
you know
that
I
I mean
agree.
that's kind of what I was getting to with my comments earlier about the just the general like state of like the culture of masculinity in 2025, right? And it's not just 2025. It's it's the general culture of masculinity in this country, and how how flawed it is, and this is like one component of it where it like it shows itself, and it's uh, how flawed it is, where men, you know, are not able to like speak out on something that has really caused harm to them for fear of being chastised or whatever, by exact peers and parents and community members, whatever. It's tragic, you know. It's not like it's it's something that we can fix, you know. It's not anything that was made by God. So, you know.
But I think as the years go on, obviously there's a lot of work to do, but like you would hope that things are getting better. Like if Carl Malone was to get that kid pregnant today, you would think he would get locked up in jail. But, back when he was playing like 30 years ago or something, like he obviously had a minor pregnant.
Fuck, dude.
She
Shout out
had a
Utah
kid.
Jazz. Damn.
She had a kid, but he never got locked up. He had a successful career afterwards, so you sort of hope that the world is evolving in the right direction. But yeah, the awareness needs to be out there because, where Ryan touches on it, like any trauma, if you bottle it up, that's kind of when people lose the plot, right? You need to kind of digest your trauma, get over it, sort of, and that sort of takes communication. So letting it out of you, processing it as you talk about it, and things like that. So, yeah, there's long ways to go, but you hope it's getting better.
And people give, wrongly, they don't prepare victims for the reality. Everybody allegedly hates predators and pedophiles, and we hear about all these prison stories that Viking Mind and others tell us about how predators get stabbed and Jared Fogle got beat up. And so people have this perception that everybody hates predators and pedophiles, and the world will welcome me with open arms as a victim, and that they will support me in my journey against someone that hurt me. And that's just not the truth. The truth is much more complicated and much more nuanced than that reality that people have been forced through their own moral projection and self-righteous fakery and hypocrisy. The reality is, I've worked with a few victims, which we've gone out and confronted their abusers, and it's very rewarding for me. Done it now. We're at number 8, and I just, and it's, this is more than a year. It's been about 18 months. I've done 8 in 18 months, and one of the biggest things that is difficult is, in addition to, we see family members circulate. We did one in a biker bar at their annual fundraiser. And, the victim had come back after that event, and we did sort of a after action. She confronted her stepfather, and she goes, with somewhat of tears, she was joyful that she got to confront her stepfather, who had abused her for more than a decade, starting when she was 5. But one of her biggest look backs was the fact that the group at the biker bars, bikers, they hate Preds. The 1%ers are going to fuck them up. And the way they rallied behind their own, and they wouldn't accept her story, and we had to sort of flee out of there. There was hundreds of bikers here, and we were doing this confrontation inside of this place, and we were basically chased out.
Were they non-unites?
Well, the wife, I had a little mini confrontation with the wife of this guy, and she was screaming at me that all girls go through that shit, basically, in justification for.
Yeah.
That's what she said. That was her. We were accusing her husband of abusing a girl, and her reaction was that. And so when I talk about this, it's not an easy journey for any victim. So when I talk about boys, yes, I think there's unique challenges for boys that come forward, very unique and very difficult and mind fucking. But for girls, there's a similar sort of journey for sure, in that, these 1%ers ain't trusting that, ain't protecting that little girl, right? Like they project on the media, and how everybody's gonna rally around against the Pred, and we're gonna fuck. She said, I thought they were gonna throw him out that night, and he was gonna, I had the dreams of when we did this, that he was driving off, being chased, and it was we that were chased. And I had to prepare her for this, that you're not going to get the reaction that you think by people, because people are fallen and they're not going to give you the satisfaction that you want. So be prepared for
You
that. And she was.
you you
So
you mentioned several like reasons why people don't come forward, or why people don't, consider, certain types of essay involving minors as a serious thing, right? Um, Different like cultural reasons, this and that, whatever, um, gender. But what I didn't hear you say, and what I think is a big part of it too, is that, sometimes people just don't know. Like Ryan didn't know. A lot of people just don't know. And it's like, if you're a
Yeah.
young person, or if you're an adult, or if something happens to you, like, you just don't know. And there shouldn't be any, like, any blame or, excuse kind of like cast on that. It's just like, you just don't know. And it could also be a cultural thing where it's just like not talked about, but still it's the same thing. It's like, people just don't know that, you know, this is a thing. And they also don't know that if it happens, they can speak on it, right? Whether it's like happens to be across genders or cultures. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I'm trying to think of this as like the glass half full concept. A lot of work to be done around like educating, communities, different cultures, for sure. And also like, like, young boys, right? A lot of educational work that can be done to, you know, bring this
But
to the forefront. So,
like, I think the world takes stages, right? You think about the corporate world 10 years ago, there was so much focus on harassment, workplace harassment, sexual harassment. There was so much education about it, you know. Depending on industries, anti-money laundering became a phase. And so I feel like, and then, it takes certain phases for things to kick in. And so it probably is a case of waiting for that right big case for it to kind of turn heads. And then
yeah,
that momentum will, make changes, right?
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it is
But
something
let's
where
also, let's also be
education.
honest. Like that whole wave of like sexual harassment, training and litigation was, mainly focused on like men harassing women, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Not to say that like, women weren't harassing men, or men were not harassing men in the workplace, but like
But that
yeah,
has evolved, like where most corporations now have mandatory training about
yep,
harassment based on gender, sexuality,
yeah,
race, so it has evolved. And so, and there's a lot more even in the tertiary education and things about that sort of thing.
yeah.
So,
I would hope so.
I
Yeah,
do, yeah, I do feel like, it just really takes that one big taste to take one country by storm, and then people talk about it and it becomes a focus. But for some reason, when it's to do with child sex crimes, I think, it makes people uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about it too much.
yeah.
And so, and I think that's where the delay tends to happen. But yeah, it is something that needs to be talked about more for sure.